Thanks, everyone.
Beautiful. Look, thank you so much for everyone joining. There's some familiar faces. There's some who are slightly newer to Future Schools Alliance, and we welcome you all. One of the things that happened today was Pasi and I were having a discussion, and I think I led him to believe that there was an obligation that he had to be here, and he didn't back away from that. And I thought, what a surprise, okay? What other organisation do you just get? Professor Pasi Sahlberg, you know, world famous thought leader and educational doer, expert in play, just dropping into your evening conversations. So Pasi, just like to welcome you to FSA.
Thank you, Peter. And what else can I say when Peter the Great asked me to join you this afternoon? Then yes, so it's happy to be with you and be part of this conversation.
So something that some of you may not know, and this is sort of private news, but Pasi is acting as an advisor in Future Schools, developing their own school. So initially a virtual school that we'll be able to all co-create, have input to, and then hopefully in 2023, opening our first FSA site. So you heard it here first, folks. An actual FSA site that will obviously be, you know, a member of FSA and a contributor to the, you know, to the promotion of future-focused learning, not only in Australia but globally. And so Pasi's helping us with the development of that, and you know, we're just super excited. How are you feeling about that, Pasi?
Good. I'm really excited as well. I think it's time is right to do something new and something different. That's what drives me to work with you. I'm really looking forward to that, Peter.
And there'll be certainly lots of opportunities away as we together explore what that could look like. And we're not saying that, you know, that this is should be everyone's practice, but it's something that we're actually going to put into play. So I'm very, very excited about that. So let's move into the topic, and it's something that's dear to my heart, and that's personalised learning or individualised learning. And I'll just, what I'm going to do is open up. So if you've got a comment, come off mic, and Jen will direct traffic. But what is the difference between personalised and individualised learning as you understand it to be? All right. Now, whilst I'm giving you a little bit of thinking time, I will relay a comment from Yong Zhao very early on. He came and visited TC, and I said, or he said, this is a great example of personalised learning, and I said it's individualised learning, Yong. And we had a bit of a ding-dong debate, and he goes, if you go down that pathway of distinguishing personalised from individualised, you're never going to get a concrete answer, and you're better off coming up with your own terms. So because it was Templestowe College, TC as we like to call it, we came up with our own model of learning that was called the take control model. And because we said we defined what take control was, nobody could disagree with it because we made up the term. So we avoided all that argument. Was it personalised? Was it individualised? By just creating our own terms. So that was advice from, you know, another supporter and advisor to Future Schools Alliance, Professor Yong Zhao. But I guess let's open it to the floor, and then Pasi and I might have some dialogue over the responses. So what do you make the difference out to be? How do you explain it to a parent, to a colleague, a board? And feel free to share it in the chat if you'd prefer to do that.
I'm happy to.
That's great. Come into the conversation.
Hey, this is something we have been grappling with since we opened. So Margaret Henry School is a relatively new school still. We're in our third year now. And that was the vision. What we knew is we wanted personalised learning, but the question was, well, what do you mean by that? Everyone was coming in with different experiences. And again, we still refer to it as personalised learning, but we had to come up with that shared understanding. And so for us, we only came to that, I guess, by trial and error. So at the start, there was a misconception. Is it individualised? Does every child need their own pathway and plan? And it was near impossible to do. You know, we realised you needed like a 1:7 ratio to give it integrity. And so then it for us became about the whole child. And so actually personalised learning is, yes, about giving the child what they need at that point in time, but personalized learning for us is about teams and about people and relationships. So if you want to personalize it, you can't necessarily meet a well-being need, a social need, and an academic need all at once. And so for us, it's saying, well, if we're looking at the child as a whole person, we need to have a team that can meet those aspects. So for us, it's taking, I guess, beyond the academics. It's about saying we're going to differentiate, but for everything. So in social and emotional learning, you come into school and you need a physical need met first, but we're going to give you that opportunity. If you're coming in and you just want to read and get stuck into your book, you can have that first. And when people say, well, how do you do that? It's really through our teams and our collaborative practice. So it's, again, still hard to define, but it's looking at that whole child. It's differentiation beyond the academics. It's more than reading, writing, and maths. It's about giving them agency, identity, and you can only facilitate that if you have a team. You can't do it by yourself. So, yeah.
So Max, just digging into your explanation there, you would contend that individualisation is more resource intensive. Would that be fair?
Yeah, and yeah, definitely. And the relationships. So it's resource intensive, it's time intensive, but on top of that, you have to know the child. So you might need a term before you could even begin to consider implementing something that gives every child their own pathway. But other people may disagree. I'm not sure.
Yep.
Matt,
Anyone
would you like
else?
to come off and share? Matt Connett? Matt, out at
Yeah, can I have a go, Jen?
excellent.
Go, Pete.
Yeah, look, I'm fascinated by the question. And we've got a large school and complex, but we're trying to provide an individual pathway for every student. So in our, just say from year 9, all of our students have got a coach. They've got their own goals. From year 9, they begin the HSC. By year 10, we've got a large section of our students at university. So we'll get band 6s in year 10, 11 and 12. So we're trying to develop individual pathways for every student. I don't believe in the linear approach to learning, and I believe everyone's got their own their path. So interesting question. Yeah.
Pete, what would you define if that's individualised? And I have every reason to agree with you. But what would personalised look like? Would it be something scaled back from that?
I'm not sure, Peter. I'm not sure.
That's all right. Take it on notice.
No, I am.
Take it on notice.
It's a question that we're asking. I believe that every student counts. So if I come from that premise that every student counts, what am I doing for that individual student? Is it just a play on words if it's individual or it's personalised? But I believe every student has got their own particular gifts and talents, and we want to allow them to build on that. And
I'm going to really push hard on this one, and you don't necessarily need to respond to this, Pete, so you can relax.
No,
I won't put you under the spotlight. But I would contend that in most good schools, we value the individual and those sorts of things, and I think we can meet it through personalisation. I think we can also meet it through individualisation. My question is, what is the technical difference? All right, because I do think that there is it's only my opinion, but how about, have we got one more person that will line up against the wall, and then we'll ask Pasi for his differentiation.
So Matt, can we bring you into the conversation?
Yeah, look, I think the difference between individualised and personalised, I think, comes down to who's at the centre of the decision-making process involved in the learning taking place. I think with individualised learning, you've really got your teacher at the centre as that sort of master craftsman, sort of analysing the needs of the student, and then taking them and facilitating that path. Whereas I think with personalised, and I could be entirely wrong here. This is just my take on it. Personalised, you've really got the student making the decisions and sometimes even designing the learning experiences. And that can be terrifying. And there's a fair chunk of work involved there for a teacher to guide that process and to see it happening in the middle of jumping through all the hoops that we're supposed to jump through. And yeah, that's my take on it. And like I said, I'm more than happy to be wrong. Yeah, there you go.
So, Pasi, tell us the answer, my friend.
Oh, no, I think, Matt, first of all, I think that you're definitely not wrong, because my thinking is very, very similar. But going back to what Maxine was saying about people asking what is the personalized learning, particularly if you include that in your school mission or curriculum or wherever you use that, I think it's very important to be able to explain what it is. And this personalized learning is particularly important because any educated parent or community member who knows something about this, and probably, if you go on Google personalized learning or something, most of the stuff you read is linked to using educational technologies. And edtech companies have been very good in this, promoting this personalized learning through the technological solutions. That's fine. I think it's a good thing. But personalized learning, of course, is much more than that. And that's why I think it's important to, particularly, if you understand it broader than just providing children with the students with the technologies and let them explore and study things that they're interested in doing, then I think it's very important to be careful with these concepts. But on the other hand, this is a similar type of conversation that we had. I remember I had about 30 years ago when I started, my first field of research a long time ago was cooperative learning. And there's another term called collaborative learning. And we had these endless debates about whether we are talking about cooperative learning or collaborative learning. And, in the end, it doesn't matter that much, but it does, if you use these terms in your own work or research or writing or something like this. But, for me, it's a little bit like, what Matt was saying, that when I think about personalized learning, and I need to apologize here because as you hear, that English is not my mother tongue. So, all these terms and concepts and ideas, I kind of had to construct. I need to work out the meaning for each of these terms. And this is one of those things. But, personalized learning for me includes much more than individualized. Just like I think Matt was meaning about this, that who decides and who decides, the curriculum, what the learning is, what we are supposed to learn. Who decides how the learning should take place, and probably even more importantly, who decides whether this learning has been successful. And for me, the essence of personalized learning includes all of these things. That it's a kind of an invitation to the learner, not just to learn the things that they want to learn, but also take a kind of a responsibility and agency of this learning from the beginning to the end. Whereas individualized learning for me is often it can, for me, it means a kind of an arrangement where for example, the whole class teaching instruction is broken down to the level of individuals, where the instruction may be, and in many cases has been decided by the teacher or by the system or by the school, and then the kind of arrangement, the organization of learning is just broken down to the individual level, so that it's individualized to the point that every child can, learn on their own pace and probably include the things that they want to study in their own ways and so on. But I see that there's a lot of common things there. That if we use these Venn diagrams, that personalized and individualized learning they are not separate things. They include a lot of similar stuff. But I think for me, in the personalized learning, this important thing is that it is really, the person who is learning, the learner, should have the agency and ownership and leadership to these different elements of learning. But again, I had to apologize that these words are something that I have had to construct these meanings and read a lot. But this seems to be, you know, if you go and read a lot of literature about this thing and research and books and others, this seems to be a kind of a common way of you know, seeing this thing. But you know, finally the interesting thing is that, you know, I'm from my background is from Finland, and that's where I did all my teaching in a school and all of my studies and everything. But you know, there we, in a Finnish context, we are using very kind of a loosely these concepts that you know, some people say when they say that the Finnish system is based on individualized learning, and some other people may say that it's a personalized, and they mean exactly the same things, that the system is designed in a way that, first of all, the needs and characteristics of each and every student will be kind of a center point, the starting point for designing designing the instructional work of the schools. So for me, on one hand, you know, these terms mean the same, but since I'm also doing a lot of reading and international work, I need to, you know, this is how I worked this out. But let me throw this back to Peter. Do you want to take this on from here and add something, or even disagree if you want to?
Yeah, I've got an idea that I'd like to bounce off people. So I think we would all agree. I'm going to get people to either thumbs up or thumbs down in agreement. And look, this is a self-selecting group. You're not on this conversation if you're a traditionalist, you know. Like, I believe in direct instruction for certain things, but just, you know, at certain times. But I'm not advocating it as the general sort of teaching methodology. But would I be correct in saying that most people who are on this call would believe in large amounts of student agency and empowerment in their learning? Would that be a fair assumption? Yeah. Okay, so we're actually not in disagreement as to what should take place. We're actually in disagreement of what to call it and providing some clarity around it. Would that also be fair? So we all agree, whether we call it personalised or individualised, whatever gives the kid the greatest amount of autonomy and, you know, and is matched to their needs. Would that be a fair assumption? Any disagreement there? Anyone like to come off mic and disagree with that? No, it might be too much of an ask, but
can I, Peter?
Yeah.
Can I say something? And I think I included already in my statement. But you know, I spent, before coming here to Australia, I spent three years in the United States, and that was a time when this personalized learning was really pushing through in different avenues, in a policy and practice and leadership and many other things. And you know, I met many people, those who actually saw, exactly as you said, Peter, that the personalized learning is about student leadership, the ownership and agency and kind of an initiative to kind of take a control of their own learning within the school. And when they realized that this whole discourse of personalized learning was so closely linked to the technology, that there were many people who kind of stopped using this term because it required so much energy and time to explain that, of course we are using technology, but personalized learning is not about, handing laptops to kids and say that, do whatever you need to do or choose the menu and study these things. So they went, some people just, because of that they went to figure out new terms, and some people just went to this individualized learning because that didn't come with this package of kind of ideas that people might have. So, that would be also interesting to hear from people in this meeting, is that have you come across here with these ideas that when you say personalized learning, that parents or students or colleagues or some others would immediately think about something, what it is, that it's not necessarily not, or that it would be a kind of a too narrow view what you think the personalized learning is. Because, if this is the case, then of course it's quite understandable that we stop using these terms that people always misunderstand and then go and use something else that is much more understandable, although it's not necessarily exactly what we mean about those things.
What I did, because I had to explain this, don't forget, to 1,000 or more parents. And so I came up with an analogy to explain our version of it. And that is, I would say, like if we had a group of 20, 10 there or 20 there, I'd say, has anyone bought a new car? And inevitably somebody would have bought a new car. And I'd say, did you have the opportunity to personalize it? And they would say, oh, yes. And I've gone, how could you personalise it? So how do we personalise a car? So, you know, we have metallic paint, we have mud flaps, we have, you know, lowered 2 inches or whatever the case is. To me, that's an example of personalising, because if you buy let's call it a Subaru or BMW, you personalise it, but at its centre, it's still the same thing. You've just personalised it generally to your particular taste. To individualise wouldn't be to say the car is your solution. The individual might be, I need some transport from this point to this point. And it could be a car, but it could be a moped. It could be a helicopter. It could be a submarine. You know, it could be a jetpack. To me, that's individualised learning, where you're not presupposing what the outcome is. You're defining the problem of where student is here, where they want to get to, and individualising is a little bit like what Pete Webster said at the start, where every kid's got their pathway along that journey, and they might look dramatically different, but there's not a presupposed outcome. So I'm just interested. I put that analogy out there for comment. So please feel free to respond to that or to Pasi's comment. Come off mic and Jen will direct the traffic.
Natasha, come off mic.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, Pete. Okay, so I assume you said that at the beginning of when you were launching the vision at TSEC, because so you know, when you go into the equivalent of year 8, which is where our flexible learning environment starts, you are putting together a 5-year plan, and which is, you know, changing regularly anyhow, but you're on this individual pathway. You're choosing all your subjects, but in terms of how you get there. So that's individual, so it's individualised learning. However, within that, the different subjects are either curriculum-based or student-led elective-based. And the curriculum-based subjects are very much the teacher and the government or whatever driving the curriculum, whereas the student-led electives are more personalised, where the students are actually taking agency and designing their learning, their choosing what they want to focus in on, and the teachers are teaching them the skills in a masterclass or something to then be able to apply that and then to develop their pathway. I think that we don't do PBL enough, but my experience and background is through project-based learning, which is highly personalised as well. So yeah, that's where my individualised, sort of broad and personalised comes in, it narrows it more.
So am I right in saying, Natasha, that you have personalisation within individualised pathway?
Yeah.
Right. Michelle, would you like to come in to the conversation?
Yeah, Natasha just stole some of my material though, so I'm going to back you up. At the Knox School, we are going down a pathway of skill assessment in some of our areas, and particularly at the year 9 and year 4, 5 and 6 levels. And so we assess things like contribution, and we assess collaboration, and we still teach content, but our assessment is very different. And we are trying to work through what does collaboration look like at the beginning level, where a student or a group of students might work together and pull apart a task but still work individually. And then at a higher level, they begin to understand how to truly collaborate. And so our discussions with our students in feeding back growth content to get to the next level of what we call the rubric is to teach them the skill to move on and move upwards in that skill that they're trying to develop. And the skills are very much driven by the students and the types of subjects that they choose in year 9 level in particular. But what I also wanted to add was I'm really struggling with individualised learning as a title. Completely struggling with it, because to me individualised learning is the individual. So then how do we at the Knox School in particular bring in collaboration into individualised learning if we are going down that pathway of calling it that term? It's just a mental block in my head, so I'd like to throw that out there. And how do we contribute to society if it's individualised learning? So my preference would always be to use the term personalised learning. I like it, and I've heard that being thrown around a lot in different schools. So it's just a semantic to me as to whether you use individual or personalised, but in my head, individualised blocks that collaborative effort that we're trying to promote. It blocks the contribution that we're trying to promote within our school.
Thank you, Michelle. Kathy, do you want to lead on from there?
Yes,
Thanks.
thank you, everybody. And I will now lower my hand, even though, you know, I'm sure raising and lowering your hand doesn't happen in individualised or personalised contexts. Sorry, I'm a bit late. I work at Cathwest Innovation College, and it's a great joy of mine to work with Samantha Boreham, who's with us and who inspires me every day. I think just picking up that idea of society that Michelle just mentioned, sometimes I think we can get a bit caught in the educational sphere, and a bit of a concern about using the term individual and individualised things is that culture of individualisation that is very prevalent in society, and which I think a lot of people see as negative, the ethic of the individual at the expense of the collective. Whereas personalised, I think, is a much more human kind of word, and I think captures, like the chat is fantastic. I think there are so many good ideas, but I suppose I finish with Peter Hutton's comment earlier, that it's not so much in the words, and I mean, we can have a great semantic debate, let alone cultural and political debate. It's in the explanation. But I think one of the ways that we get the message out more effectively is to not use words that have other connotations in other contexts.
I've got to just jump in there, Kathy. Great to see you online as well. It's awesome. One of the things that I would point out, and it was an inadvertent consequence, because at TC we did have individualised learning plans, and still do, is my understanding, Tash. One of the things that I observed was, I would suggest, a move towards a more individualised and, I would dare say, selfish philosophy than I see in most schools. And my take on that was that in most schools, you have kids doing a whole lot of voluntary activity because the rest of the class time was so boring. Whereas when kids are allowed to have an individualised learning plan, they were pursuing things that were they were obsessed by, that they were focused on. And so when you wanted a volunteer to do something else, it was so much less attractive, giving up your time from something that you were committed to, in charge of, etc., rather than, in a conventional school where, personally, when I was at school, I would volunteer to do anything. I'd clean blackboard dusters, I'd go out and sweep the cricket pitch, anything but stay in class and do what I consider to be boring work. Now, I'm not saying all schools are like that, but I'm just saying that there did tend to be a focus on the individual, and we were making steps to correct that. Tash, I'm not sure if anything, if you still see that, but it is the nature of adolescence to become a little self-absorbed, I think.
I think our job is to allow flexibility, but also allow students to sort of have the time, the space, the resources to go exploring and play and learn from experience and engage with people, not just within the classroom. Bring industry and get students out into industry and get them to think beyond what is the norm from what they've experienced thus far. And that's they're good problems to have, having students want to stay in the classrooms or in the learning spaces, which are no longer really classrooms. They're more just very agile spaces, where for us, it's a good problem when we're trying to get students to go out into the, play areas or outside into the, playground for them to engage in other things. And for us, it's moving kids on to the next thing. It's encouraging them to think outside the box. And isn't that a wonderful problem to have in a learning environment where students are wanting to stay and learn more and ask more questions and be curious? And, it's such a wonderful space to be in, but it is hard work. It is messy. Like Kathy said in one of the chats, it's hard because it's easier to do what's usual and timetable and structure, but all that personalized and regardless of what the term is, it's the students' exploration of what their passions are and what they're keen on learning about, and that requires flexibility, and that's hard work sometimes.
Thanks, Sam. And do you want to follow on from there?
Yeah, I guess I'd just like to ask a question actually and hear how people approach this. Like I love the idea of personalised or individualised learning. I'm not fussy about words as long as we're as long as we're doing it. One of the real challenges that I think I face in my work is bringing other staff along for the ride, particularly staff who are used to perhaps a traditional way of doing education, and having that confidence to let go and the willingness to take the risk, to let go of learning and let students start to take control and drive the show. So even if we're trying to put things in place, through college leadership and through our lighthouse group of teachers, of innovators, you still just have this significant number who say, yes, I'm keen, but can't or won't. I'm not sure where it fits sometimes. So I just love to put that out and hear what people think of that and how to press that forward.
All right, thoughts from the group?
Can I jump in?
Please do, Wendy.
I completely agree with you, Dan. In fact, I wrote some things here. There's a divergence there between a system perspective and a classroom teacher perspective, isn't there? And that you do have those lighthouse teachers who move heaven and earth to create these beautifully personalised learning environments, but they can be just subjugated by the HSC. I'm in New South Wales. I'm appalled at the current discussion that it's HSC at all costs, and it's taking people down. So, yeah, I would love to hear from the wisdom of the group. How do we personalise this this way of changing mindsets? I think it's great that we understand that this is so keen and so core to transformative learning, but how do we have that conversation further afield? Thanks.
Can I direct this this question to Pasi if it's possible, because we've got one of the world experts there. So let's take Wendy's provocation on notice. Ideas, Pasi, how do we move this forward?
Yeah, well, this particular thing, I'm in New South Wales as well, and I agree with you, Wendy, about the conversations and political response to this. But I think my short answer is that it's too late to take it anywhere right now, because the thing has happened, and we are in the middle of trying to choose between bad and worse solutions to this thing, because there's no kind of a good thing to do. I think what is kind of a telling in this situation is that and it's not only this final examination HSC issue and question here, but now we really see now how little personalized our school systems practically everywhere around the world have been until now. Because this is not just Australia that is in this situation of what to do when everything is disrupted and the traditional teaching and the work of the school is not working as it was. Just think about if the students had been even a little bit more prepared to again take the agency and leadership of their own learning and just go there when the things like this happen. We wouldn't be talking about these things in a way that we are right now. So I don't know what the answer is. I've been having these conversations here for the last during the last couple of few weeks, and nobody seems to have a kind of a good idea of what to do. But what we can say, how to go, your question, Peter, that how to take it from here is that let's take this as a kind of a serious sign or evidence of the education system's inability to actually educate students. And we are talking about almost adults who would be able to take a lead of their own things. I'm not expecting that everybody would be ready to prepare themselves for something like a school living examination, what it is here. But I think the reaction should and could have been much more positive in a way that, at least that we could reduce the number of those students who really need some support and hand-holding in terms of, getting ready for these examinations. Then the other thing is that I think that this also shows how fixed these traditional examination and assessment systems are, that they are fixed to the particular point of time where everybody has to take the same exam. It doesn't have to be this way. And I think that, you know, if we continue to have the HSCs or whatever examinations we have here or internationally, I think one thing that we learn from this one is that they need to be more flexible. They need to be designed in a way that, you know, the students, they can take the exam if they have to do that when they're ready to do that. And there's no one point of time when the exam, you know, everybody has to take and spend a week or two taking all these exams. So, but again, I think it's too late now to do those things. But you know, these are some of these lessons that I'm taking away from this situation.
Kathy?
Yeah, if I can just jump in here, it was interesting listening to Wendy talk about conversations. I'm not sure if Peter Webster's still with us, but Peter and I are both in the Diocese of Parramatta, where we have Greg Whitby as our fearless leader. And Greg Whitby is extremely critical of the New South Wales HSC and really puts his head on the line and sometimes gets it chopped off with what he has to say in terms of provocations. That's putting it mildly about the system. At Cath West, we have no HSC exams, but all the students achieve a HSC, and some of them will be going to university, and that's part of the personalisation. And it's through the leadership of people like Greg Whitby that he, I guess, entrusts a school to take that on. And so going back to your question, Dan, at a system level, there needs to be that entrusting, and there needs to be time given, and there needs to be lots of risk taking. And that's where I think personalised learning, well, if I then jump to the school level, there's personalising learning for staff. And yeah, Sam and I have seen some people, you know, make leaps and bounds, and when you're talking about that Lighthouse group, but the reality is there is no choice in our school. You have to have everyone subscribe to this. And Sam and I were just talking a little bit earlier before coming onto this about our school had to start again. And so to try and create some sort of a hybrid in some of your contexts, I think would be one of the greatest challenges by virtue of being able to do that. Well, we did inherit some of it. The rest we created. That was the great gift to us. But, you know, in New South Wales, you do not have to do exams, and you can achieve a HSC, and you can achieve multiple outcomes. It's just a shame the message doesn't get out there. I don't know how many schools I've been in spruiking to year 10 students, year 9 students to come. And when I say you can get a HSC without a HSC exam, the teachers look daggers at me and the kids just go, get out. They just cannot believe it.
Right.
I'm going to drag. Can I just ask one thing? I'm going to drag it back to the topic of personalised and individualised. Not that this doesn't have a place in that, Kathy, because it does. And interestingly, we work with a group called the Constellation, and you'll meet several members of the Constellation in up and coming FSA events, but they're 10 of the most innovative schools in the world. And on our first meeting, so here you've got the leaders of 10 of the most innovative schools in the world, and out of a 90-minute conversation, 30 minutes was spent discussing how to get kids into uni. So it's not peculiar to Australia. It's an international issue, and it's certainly one that, you know, that needs to be addressed. But I am going to drag the topic back. Matt, you've got your hand up. Scott's got his hand up. Matt, do you want to head off and then
waiting
Scott?
line as well.
Oh, sorry, hang on. I'll let you direct traffic, Jen.
That'd be great. Thanks, Pip. All right. I'm going to do it in order of kind of hands and comments. So, Pip, I'm actually going to bring you into the conversation because I know what you've got to share here will certainly resonate with the group.
Thanks. I think I just made a comment that in order to help our students start on a personalised learning journey, they have to have a confidence in their own learner agency. There's no point giving them options if they don't feel that they have choices and they don't know what learner agency is, and they don't know that they can actually drive the car themselves, no matter how heavily it's personalised. They have to have that confidence. And I think the work we've been doing with Melbourne University with the new metrics program to create 8 learning ambitions And each of those learning ambitions has a whole framework. So the learner agency framework has probably about 8 different criteria that we're building out. Within that, I think we're finally starting to help students build and understand that concept that they can drive. And I think once they understand they can drive, then we have to really open up and let them drive. And that's really exciting to me to see what we can actually move forward with. So I'm very, very grateful to be part of that new metrics program and that learner profile at the moment.
Beautiful metaphor. Thanks, Pip. Scott, and then Matt, and then I'll bring it back to you, Peter.
I'm happy to go now, but Matt's hand was up first. But anyway, I'll go now. Now I'm on speaker. Sorry, Matt. Look, I guess one of the interesting things for me is that it's interesting that Pip brought up the Melbourne Uni New Metrics pilot that we're all part of at the moment. But I saw a tweet about that only a week or two ago. And again, the conversation for even new metrics keeps pointing that every kid must be headed towards university. And while we're still bringing everything back to university as a success point, I still think that's a bit of a concern. So one of the things I'm reasonably proud of at the moment is that we've rewritten even our subject selection booklets this year to remove the term that, you know, to be on an ATAR pathway or a HSC pathway. And we've got about 50% of our students who've chosen their year 10 into 11 subjects for next year on either on non-HSC pathways now. So we've got about 77, just under 50%. We've got 77 kids on a traditional HSC pathway with, I imagine, about half of those going to go for an ATAR. And the other half of our year group is either on a big picture, a transition pathway, or a ROSA pathway. So we've really promoted the ROSA pathway as well. So I think we've just started to change the language in how we're talking about the end point of school and personalising the next or the final 2 years of school for our kids anyway. So I just don't want it always to be that, you know, always pointing to uni. I think the final point for everybody should be that they're all going to end up in work, whether they go TAFE, straight to work, through uni to work, etc.
Thanks, Scott. Now, Peter, I will bring it back over to you. Matt, unless there was anything else there, Matt? No, we're all good. Peter, and I've just noticed, you haven't noticed in the chat, sorry, there's just been a post there from Pasi of Alan Reed's the second Gonski reviews of idea of personalised learning. So that sits in the chat. I'll make sure that link gets sent out as well. Thanks, Pasi.
I think Scott makes a good point that it shouldn't be all around university pathways. I guess one of the things that I've become increasingly aware of, I'm not sure that we should also make it just about work. You know, I've got 2 kids, and yes, I want them in work, but I think there's a growing realization with machine intelligence, etc., that's, you know, that paradigm is going to change, and there are already some people who are, you know, generationally unemployed, and as we lose more jobs to technology, there is a fair likelihood, if you listen to Elon Musk and some of his projections, that we might end up with only, you know, 30 to 40% of people working in the not too near future. And so I think we've got to be somewhat careful in rejigging it away from uni, which I think is the right thing to do, not to make work the other new default, and that instead what we aim for is fulfillment, you know, that everyone can have a fulfilling life. Because particularly, I know I've had some kids with disabilities, and really paid work is not a viable option, but they can still live fulfilling lives. So I'm not disagreeing with you, Scott. All I'm saying is that if we build outcomes around general fulfillment, that can be through lifelong study, it can be through voluntary work, it can be through paid employment, etc. So I just throw that one into the mix.
I agree, just for the record.
Great, mate. Good on you.
Sam,
I'm sure we were in furious agreement. I just wanted to bring back that point, because I think if we don't make it about life fulfillment, we could actually be setting this next generation up for fairly significant mental health issues, because there's just not going to be the employment particularly for people with lower cognitive skills.
Sam, I'll bring you in, and then Manisha.
I just wanted to tap into that, Peter, what you were saying a moment ago about, the one understanding the whole. It's not just about the curriculum. It's not just about work. It's just not about what's next after school. It's about those transferable skills, regardless of whether you're going to university or going into work or any other type of post-school education system. What are the skills that wrap around every single human being to allow them to function with confidence and courage and that commitment they need to take on challenges and face real problems. What place does that have in understanding what personalising any learning is for any student?
I think that's a nice segue into what's happening up there at Port Macquarie Adventist School. Manisha.
Yeah, just tapping in a bit more into that personalised learning and individualised learning and life fulfillment. We've been running a Shark Tank young entrepreneurs type program at the moment with our current Year 7s. It's our first secondary school grade coming through. And we've been trying to ignite fire underneath our young people with their passions and driving their passions and driving their fulfillment. And so over the space of last term, they produced and developed small businesses that they've presented then to investors, which they're now running this term to try and start fueling some fire underneath them for life fulfillment and building direction and pathway, because this is a big journey that we're going on at the moment, because we're building with a new grade level every year and with a new secondary program every year, right up through to HSC years. And we've found and we've noticed that not just in the development of their small businesses, but in the development of their characters and their person and their relationship with each other and their problem solving skills, that through this kind of whole person learning, they've developed this fuel and this fire underneath themselves to then achieve what they want to be achieving. So it's amazing what we've seen these Year 7s produce. They've produced HSC quality learning in terms of New South Wales type language, but they've also developed themselves as people and as functional people in society, no matter what learning level they're at.
Thank you so much. Peter, back over to you. I'm just looking at the time. We've probably got about 10 minutes left on this think tank, the official think tank.
Yeah, look, I've just got one comment talking about how to fund, let's call it individualised learning, where every young person has their own pathway. And then I'm going to throw over to Pasi for some inspiration and wisdom. When TC knew that we wanted to go down the pathway of, let's call it individualised learning, where every student was selecting their own learning program, whether they be subjects within school or outside, or instead of doing 6 subjects, they did 4 and they went out and rode their horse for 2, whatever their individual pathway was. I looked around the world. I could only find at that stage 3, so this is probably 10 years ago, I could only find 3 schools doing it. And one was the Avenue School in the US. And back then they were charging $80,000 per student. And each student had 8 staff on their individualised learning planning team. So they achieved it with ridiculously high amounts of fees. And, these 8 staff did more than that one student, obviously. They, would have had 30 to do, but they did it through a staff intensive model. Then there's a school called the Carpe Diem Collegiate School, and that's in Arizona. And at one point, I think they had 4 or 5 campuses. Their data is unbelievable. The kids spend their time in something that looks like a telephony box, like a little call center box. And their data is unbelievable. So if you want growth, stick them in one of those little cubicles and watch them go. And that uses a computer algorithm to personal or to individualize that student's curriculum. The only problem is the kids hate it. They absolutely hate it. I've spoken to a few of them and they leave in droves. And from 5 schools, they're back at 1 school, okay? So one school achieved it with staff, another school achieved it with a computer algorithm, and the 3rd school was actually Caulfield Grammar School, and they had their staff, just the individual teachers, do it in primary, and they did that for 2 years, and there was almost a revolt. So they were the only 3 examples I could find around the world you know, in terms of how to do it. And so when we came up with our method, I thought, who else can I get to write this individualized learning plan? And I just signed off on somebody doing a train the trainer program, you know, like they'd done that. And I thought, that's it, that's the answer. Like, the parents like these kids even more than we do generally. I'll get the parents to write, you know, we'll run a big training program. This is how you write an ILP, etc. Showed it to a friend of mine and she almost died, like in laughter. And she goes, so you're going to replace one dictatorship with another. So the parents are going to become the dictators, you know, of adolescence. I can't see any problem with it at all. And I thought, oh, gee, it's back to square one. And in the end, what we landed on was, let's get the students to write their own individualized learning plan, supported by the parents, and then overseen by a senior member of staff. Now, it certainly wasn't perfect. No school ever is, but I felt like that was a reasonable compromise of putting students in control of their own learning. And so it wasn't a case of having to pry responsibility out of the teacher's hands, because in this particular case, the kids were, you know, if they chose not to be there, they weren't in the class. So they were, you know, literally put in charge of their own learning. So that's another way that it was done. Pasi, inspire us, my man.
Thank you once again. Thank you for having me in this conversation. I think, you know, the first thing I think about here is that if we had somebody from Singapore in this conversation, their conclusion probably would be that let's talk about personalized individualization. You know, this is how the Singaporeans come about these complicated concepts that we are here talking about. My second conclusion here is that maybe we actually can stop talking about individualized learning versus personalized learning. This seems to be a kind of a common sentiment among many of you who have spoken. Let's celebrate the diversity of personalized learning, accept that there's no one way to define that. That means different things in different contexts and for different people. And I would like to conclude here. You asked me some wisdom. I don't want to I don't actually have anything to contribute from my own mind, but I shared with the chat box a brilliant piece by Alan Reed when he reacted to the second Konski review. And he's writing here in the very end of the piece, something like this, that if personalized learning is the goal, why not evaluate a number of different models of personalized learning? And then he continues by concluding this piece by saying that the version of personalized learning Australia promotes should be one that nurtures a love and a passion for learning, not one that reduces it to checklist. And I think that, you know, that's it. And, you know, if we can take this further from here by, you know, finding our own way of understanding and helping our colleagues and others to understand what personalized learning is. And maybe the FSA could do what Alan is proposing here, to collect these different models and different conceptions and ideas of personalized learning and celebrate this diversity. I think we would be probably better off than continuing debating about the individualized and personalized learning. This has been wonderful conversation, Peter. Thanks for having me here.
Thank you. With a few minutes to go, are there any last contributions from the group?
I just want to come back to a conversation last year in one of these think tanks where it was Peter Hutton who was talking about the vital place of well-being. I just remember it was like this light bulb moment or something for you, Peter, where in light of months of remote learning in Melbourne, that just seemed to really come to the fore. And so I just guess I'm thinking that personalising learning just really embraces and enhances student well-being as well.
Thank you. All right, Peter.
Just on behalf of FSA, I just want to thank you for digging into the conversation, to be so involved, for everything that you do for our young people, for everything you do for colleagues, both in your own school and outside. You know, Victoria is the lockdown capital. We have done it longer and harder than anyone else, but, you know, New South Wales, very competitive, trying to catch up now. But like, we feel your pain. Those who have been through, you know, more than half a year in combined lockdown, from your Victorian colleagues, know that we're there. If we can help, if you just want to reach out and just, you know, have virtual drinks on a Friday, we're going to reinstitute that as a we did it when Victoria was in lockdown. So we're going to reinstitute that as of, let's make it this Friday. Never hold off a good opportunity to get stuck in. But if you just want to jump online, talk about your week, it often ends up in professional conversation, but it doesn't have to. But know that we're there to support you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Peter. We do have another event on, I'm just looking at my other computer here, coming up this Thursday on the 12th of August. So we have Momentum series. We're actually module 5, so Dave will be leading that conversation. And if you haven't been on the FSA website for some time, there's a new tab over on the far right of the homepage, which will lead you to an event page, and we're endeavouring, we've got a goal of getting all of our events up on that website so that you can go in there with ease and just see what's happening and where these events are, when these events are happening. With that all being said, we will see you either on Thursday for Momentum series, or come and join us for drinks on Friday. Stay safe, everyone, and we'll see you soon. Thank you.